being an entrepreneur sounds cool, but the reality of building a business is very, very difficult. Every level that you hit, there's a lot of things that suck that you just won't want to do. What you're capable of is on the other side. I don't feel like it.
And if you're committed to what it is that you're trying to do, nothing is going to stop you from getting there.
Welcome back to another episode of Real Business Owners with myself, Trevor Cowley. This week, I'm joined with Corey McNeil. I know that you guys are going to enjoy this episode. I go over communicating and how to communicate in a manner in which makes somebody want to change for the better. And so if you have somebody in your organization, employee, managers, business partners, whatever it may be, this is going to be a great episode for you to tune into in terms of how to best communicate to them in a manner in which makes them change. And it's okay if they feel a little defeated after walking away from a conversation, as long as there's some inspiration to go along with it. And so enjoy. If you're ready to level up personally or professionally, go to joinrbo.com. It's the end of the year. It's time to make some big decisions for 2025. Today, we wanted to talk about employees and the fact that everybody that's in your organization is simply a human being. And yesterday, I had to have a conversation with one of the employees here at Real Business Owners. It was a tough conversation to have, but
I missed it.
Yeah, you did miss it. Yeah. It was a good 30 to 40 minutes of just brutality.
So I guess the good
my
is
part.
It's an issue of perspective on.
No, it's absolutely
both parties.
It's absolutely 100% positive. One, if you have people that are underperforming, they're a human being. They will hit a level of complacency from time to time. That's just our nature. We get comfortable and we get then complacency. When you first start a new job, you're trying to impress and you're trying to let them know that they made a right decision. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden we keep showing up to the same environment over and over and over, very repetitively. And what ends up happening? You get chill, you get relaxed, you get to know everybody. And I said, we're friends, right? And I said, that's also part of the problem. One, I don't want to be hard on you. Two, I don't want you to get a level of comfort and complacency that you think that acting in this manner or performing in this manner is acceptable. In reality, at the end of it, I had to take ownership that I was allowing complacency happening within the organization. So it's not his fault. It's my fault. That's really what it came down to. Mm-hmm. And I had to have a difficult or a tough conversation that was somewhat maybe demoralizing or defeating in the moment. But in retrospect, when somebody really digests that conversation, they're going to come out better. And the only people that will actually come out better are the people that you want to be a part of your organization. Now, I'm not saying belittle. I'm not saying talk negatively.
Yeah, just doing a respectful way. Yeah.
Are you performing in a manner in which you're proud of? Do you think that you're operating at a level of complacency that's a little too comfortable right now? The answer was yes. And I said, I would agree with that. I've asked this, and this over the last few months, and I haven't received that once. And that was somewhat of a test to see if you're a person that's going to take the initiative. Can I drop a seed and then you grow it with your own creativity and your own thoughts, and because you want to drive your department forward? Like, that's all somebody should need, is just an idea or a seed, or let me run with it, right? Like, that's the ideal situation. And the conversation was literally about money and pay raises and opportunities and things like that. And so we had to come back to literally where we are right now and the level of performance that's happening as of today versus what would equate to a potential greater opportunity financially. And unfortunately, it's like, hey, we've had to invest in this area. We've had to razz you over here and over here and over. We've said we're willing to invest in your growth, but you're really not taking the initiative. That's just a hard truth. But I'm not speaking anything belittling. I'm literally just blatantly saying, let's have a real conversation here and talk about the fact that you're not performing in a manner in which you know you can. You're not operating at your full potential, and you're not holding a high standard. And really, it comes back to me. I'm allowing you to do all of those things. And at this point, this conversation is now happening because I'm done allowing it. So let's talk about the expectations that I have moving forward, right? Because I believe that you could do it. This is what I would need from you in order for us to win as a whole, so that we can all be making more money. It's realigning, resetting expectations of what a win looks like. And after that conversation, came in the next day smiling from ear to ear because he was proud to have something to show me that conversation didn't fall on deaf ears.
Well, there's a saying when it says that, like, you don't rise to your potential, you fall to your
floor, basically. You will
What you're
always
willing
get
to
what you tolerate, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're willing to tolerate the chirping alarm that goes off, that smoke alarm, it's not going to just stop by itself. The moment that chirp bothers you, and it'll find you in that moment where you have very little tolerance level, and it's going to chirp and you're like, oh, I'm going to change that battery. I can't deal with it anymore. But there was a point where you were tolerating it.
Yeah.
You were avoiding what you knew you needed to do to make the situation better, but you just really weren't addressing it because it would take a little bit of effort.
One of the very earliest conversations that you and I had, and this is way before the birth of the podcast or the masterminds or any of that. I remember I was in your office and the conversation shifted to, like, you're only willing to, basically you have what you're willing to accept, what you're willing to tolerate.
Yeah.
You know,
You'll get
like
what
if you wanted
to
if you wanted a big mansion on the hill, you're not going to tolerate your performance until you get that thing. You know, and that has stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah. If I walked the same way home every single day and I would get my ass kicked every single day, and there's another way home, who's the idiot? To a certain level, that's also part of my responsibility. I am responsible for me getting my ass kicked if there's a pattern here, right? Like, that way, bad news. Is there an alternative solution here to where I can get home and not have to deal with that, right? And so everything that exists in your life, you are tolerating right now.
Yeah, but that feeling, that frustration, before we went live, was the
friction,
the concept of friction, right?
Correct.
But that friction is really the indicator that there's something more that is possible or what you want that you're not getting it on the current path.
That's the entire point, is basically saying there had to be a little bit of friction between us. And I said, I'm happy that we have the relationship that we have, where you know that this is coming from a place of love, of me wanting to see you win. But like, we have to have this conversation in terms of performance, expectation. This is what I need from you, because it's going to get to the point where we end up paying so much that we can basically hire anybody to do that role. And we can find the best of the best of the best. So you might as well be becoming the best of the best of the best. How do you do that? Not through complacency. I said, you should want to work for a place that doesn't accept you for where you're at right now in terms of your talents, in terms of what you're willing to accept or even tolerate from yourself. You should want to be around somewhere that's going to hold you to a higher standard, because are you operating at your full potential and you're never going to grow from this moment forward? He said, no. So we know that we have growth. The only way we're going to experience growth is if there's a little bit of friction or a little bit of pain or a little bit of suffering. That's a part of this.
I used to go out on my way to avoid friction, confrontation, difficult conversation. I just didn't like it. Nobody really does, right? But you know this, like, I've had to have some difficult conversations with mastermind members. You know what I mean? I'm just like, it's just what it is. But
yeah.
But the reason is because of the fact that, like, I finally kind of come to accept that that's part of where the growth happens, right? Is I'm like, yeah, no, I'll kick somebody out if I got to let this person go. But this all goes back to a pre-framing of an employee. Still very close friends with him to this day. He's like one of my brothers, right? Like, back when I ran my construction company, this guy we used to smoke weed and stuff together. Like, he was one of my, like, you know, my homies, like taking bong rips and shit. But it's different when you're rolling up on the job, and this is the part that he didn't understand. Bro, first of all, I found you literally you and Frank sitting in a closet getting high on a job site. Like, dude, if the super walks in, I lose that contract. If they get the cops called or anything, like, dude, you're now affecting my mortgage and my kids. Like, I can't stand for that shit. So sorry that I got to say it that plainly, but don't do that shit anymore, right? Don't go smoke weed on the job.
Yeah.
But they thought it was okay because we smoked weed before, right?
Yeah.
Just to them, that was the lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then I remember that I told him, I said, hey, dude, I got to ask you a favor. And I'm, you know, of course, you know, pay you overtime. We had a job. I remember it was Super Bowl weekend. And I'm like, hey, we got to have this job done. This is like, you know, I'd never missed the deadline in all my years. I had a great deal of pride on that. Is that if I told another tradesman or if I told the homeowner, we're going to have it done on this day, I would literally go days without sleep to make sure that happened. And I was looking at what needed to get done. It wasn't going to get done. And he ends up just no-showing on me. And so I stayed, worked that night, worked through the weekend, and was able to get it done. And I go to call him that evening, and I just left him a voicemail and just said, hey, don't bother coming to work tomorrow. We had a really difficult conversation, and I was not looking forward to it. I was really nervous because, again, this is one of my earliest firings of an employee, let alone the fact that he was such a close friend. And I remember his response was like, I can't believe you would do this to a homie. And my response was, I just tripped into like this anger, and I'm like, fuck you. If I'm such a homie, why did you put me in a position that I would have to do this? I would never do this to you, dude.
Yeah.
And so, but what I learned from myself in that situation is that I can make tough calls and tough situations and remove my personal feelings out of the situation and looking at it because, dude, I still had to pay my bills.
Yeah.
But that's carried with me for a long time.
I don't know who I was talking to, but I've said something along the lines of, I've never fired anybody. I've never fired anybody. They've all fired themselves. I was just the person to deliver the message.
That's true. That's the truth.
So
he fired himself. Yeah.
If you think about it, if somebody's an absolute killer and they're relieving stress off of your shoulders, showing up, doing all of the like,
dude, if he hadn't been smoking weed in the closet, I might have let that slide. Even that
we're gonna interfere that person. No, you're not gonna fire that person. That is operates. He fired himself. Yeah. Their actions. So back in the day when I would do interviews, when I was sitting there hiring literally all the time, central business funding, because call center people, they'll high turnover, you know what I mean? It wasn't a high wage job. So it was sales, call center, it was a $200 sale or whatever. So how much commission can you really pay, right? In my interviews, I would start saying, just so that you know, I'm the individual that's going to give you the opportunity to work here, but you will decide whether you continue to work here. I will not make a decision of whether I'm firing you or not. You will make that decision based upon how you show up here every single day. If we have to have a conversation and you need to be let go, you should already know exactly why you're being let go, because I don't just randomly let somebody go that's performing well, that has a good attitude, that shows up on time. That's the type of individual that I want here. So if you really look at it, your actions will determine whether you work here for years or whether this is just something that you're going to do for a few weeks to grab a couple bucks and be fired.
Yeah, but I think there's a lesson that sits inside of that, though, too, that needs to be said. I know that you would never ask somebody to do something that you're not willing to do yourself or haven't already done, right? So it's this leadership of, but when you're living that standard, right, and you're like, no, dude, I show up on time. I'm here. I do the shit that I'm supposed to do. If that friction comes from the fact that that person isn't, really ultimately who's the one to blame on it? It's going to come back to that person, right?
Yeah,
the thing is you're the one that actually set the standard.
Yeah.
So it goes back to what you're saying is like, I've let it slide up to this point.
Correct.
But I'm the one that's actually setting the standard, right?
So the idea around the whole podcast was it's okay to have difficult conversations with people inside of your organization and have them feel defeated, but also leave at the same time a little inspired to want to be better. And if it doesn't sting a little bit for them, they will not change. When you put your hand on the stove, what saves your hand from being burnt to death or to a crisp is the fact that there's a pain, a friction that saves you. That friction was a positive thing. That pain, that it let you know that no, this isn't okay. This area is not good. In other words, it's okay to cause a little pain or a little friction in somebody's life, because that's how true change is made.
Well, dude, it typically doesn't sting unless there's a seed of truth.
Unless there's some truth to it. It's the same thing for us, though, as human beings, just in general. I will not change, me personally, unless I'm at a point where there's some friction, where I feel defeated in an area. I might look at myself physically and say, I don't want to accept this anymore. I kind of feel defeated, but also inspired to want to make a change. So there's this happy medium that happens where it's just like, no, but sorry that I've allowed that to happen because it is on me. That's showing leadership that you're taking some ownership of lack of performance here because you've allowed it to happen on your watch. So there's a little defeating, there's a little of you taking some ownership, and then also talking about if we want this type of outcome, more money, more opportunity, Don't you think if we did these things and we systemized this, or you let a little bit more here, maybe that would provide something for the company that would allow them to be able to pay you more or create more opportunities for the company so that there's more, whatever it may be. It's helping them see something greater than just their own perspective of like, hey, I want to make more money, which is something that everybody wants. But the question that they have to answer is, are they performing in a manner in which is deserving of that? And if you can't figure out how to have the conversation of not right now because of X, X, and X, but I do believe that you can get to that, then you're going to have a very difficult time as a business owner, right? But I think too many business owners, because they're nervous about losing people, they don't really hold a high standard, or they don't want to have tough conversations. They tiptoe around some shit that they know that they should be addressing. But I promise you, it's refreshing for both parties. It's almost like I feel a sense of relief where he now knows this is what I need to do to be the most effective and efficient and to win in my department. And now that I have a clear path because of that conversation, because of that friction, it's almost like a load is off the shoulders where now he knows where his energy and focus should go every single day.
But it's also got to free you up from perspective of like, not necessarily resentment, but almost like a resentment or frustration. Is like,
I've asked of these things twice, but we have to create a system for these outcomes that I've asked for. And I said, I shouldn't have to create these systems for you to create the outcome that I hired you to create. We've given you the tools to do it. So let's create a little bit of a system so that it can keep you honest throughout the day. I'm like, okay, cool. There's 7 hours for that. Okay. An hour for that, an hour for that. Where the fuck are the other 28 hours gone?
You have to, as like a parent, right? You see your kid's not performing. You can get frustrated. You're like, shit, man, come on. But it's because of the fact that you actually see somebody and something in that person. You see the ability for that person to be able to reach to a certain standard. And you're like, I've provided you the ability to be able to do this. Is it acceptable for you to be where you're at or not right now? Some people, they're just okay with that. They're like, nope, this is the maximum of what I'm willing to put in for what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah.
Some people just, that's just the way it is.
And there's that exchange for some people, and that's okay. And those people probably will not work in an area in which demands a little bit higher standard, where they're always outperforming what they get paid. Not performing at what they get paid, outperforming it, so that the next time that there is a talk about a raise or more money, that it's just absolutely a no-brainer. Like if I'm a star athlete and I'm kind of getting underpaid, I'm not going to bring my performance down to that pay level. Then when the contract talks come up in a year or two,
then you're going to
then say, hey, I can perform better. I think you should pay me that $100 million contract that so-and-so that has the same position of me on that team over there. That's the contract they got. What they're doing is they're performing at the most elite level that they have the capacity to perform at.
That the salary is going to follow them.
It will only catch up. It has no choice. For every action, there's a reaction. There is no other choice but for that money, for that individual to increase dramatically. The problem is the gap in between which the performance happens and then the pay catches up. And that's where the regular human average brain can't compute. Why would I put in more effort when I only get paid X? But yet you complain about never really getting raises or getting paid at a high level. You don't operate at a high level. Therefore, the thought of paying you at a high level never hits the business owner's mind.
You should be creating so much value in that they're like, I'm an absolute idiot if I don't take this.
Yeah.
So the same things is that what it is as an employee, I should create so much value.
Correct.
That my employer would be like, I would be an absolute idiot if that person left.
Yep.
So the same thing applies as a business owner for your customer base. This law, this rule, it applies that way. So we hold ourselves to that same standard. Members in our mastermind, accounting, customers, whatever, create that gap of value so far.
If you pay late, you probably have other people pay you late.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that concept?
Yeah.
And people were like, the funny thing about it is when I decided to pay everybody on time, I started to get paid more from my customers on time. Every action has a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't believe that we can sit here and complain about a 30-day or 60-day late on invoices, but yet we're always doing the same. What happens is you're the very thing that you complain about. where you can outperform yourself at all levels, all the time, the best to your ability in the moment. And the reason why I say that is because we, again, hit highs and lows as humans. Sometimes when you're at a low, just kind of getting up and doing is a win, right? Like that is what your capacity or whatever is of that day. Like, some days I'll run really fast. Some days I'm walking the full 10. I'm doing what I can to honor that based upon the level of performance that I can perform at that day. And if you're not doing everything that you have the ability to do, to not be the very thing that you're complaining about, you're going to probably receive what you complain most about. Friction exposes your weaknesses. That's what friction does. You're learning things about yourself that you no longer want to accept about yourself. The fatigue lowers your tolerance level for bullshit. I don't want to fucking deal with it. I'm tired.
Oh, yeah.
I only have so much energy.
Yeah, we've had some conversations just recently about that, yeah.
Okay. So all of this stuff, even though it doesn't feel like it's good because the fatigue is creating the friction and it's exposing where you're weak. In other words, maybe your weaknesses, you're too giving, you're too kind, you're too generous. And to say to this, too kind, to about all these positive things, it's almost like counterproductive to what Jesus says, I get, like religion, like be kind, be that, but it also gets to a point where you're so kind to others that you're not kind to yourself because you've given everything and then you have nothing left for you. And I've watched that over the years where it's always give, serve, serve, serve. And that's how you bring value to the world in your eyes, is by being of service.
Yeah, this last one though has taught me this though, is that
but the friction,
my identity is wrapped up in the service.
Yeah.
But the weirdest part is going through this is that I'm like, okay, but why do I have to have, like, where's that validation needed? Why?
Yeah.
What is missing inside of me that is requiring an external feeling of like, okay, cool, I've helped that person, or what is it that is missing inside of me that I have to like find that outside of me?
I think what happens is you're going to pop out the other side with new philosophies and a new perspective.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Because you're
it's
just
breaking down the old ones.
Correct.
Right now,
right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel good, but there's some shifting that's still happening, right? I made an Instagram story this morning. How do you respond to extreme friction? So some people, they will do 75 hard. And when some of the friction points start happening on 75 hard, they're adapting to it in a manner in which says, you know what, I'm going to stop because this is creating friction in my life here or here or here. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that's the very lesson that it was supposed to teach you, is that every single time that you hit a friction point, you don't adapt in a manner in which says continue to move forward. And maybe let's just to change our approach a little bit, but we're still progressing forward. Maybe you just completely give up. Maybe there's a task or things within inside of your business that when you reach your friction point, you figure out a way not to do that thing. My guess is it's not the actual thing that's creating that friction.
It's a symptom of it.
It's bringing awareness to an area in which you have friction, which might be communication between you and your spouse. And you need to figure out how to communicate better. Obviously, there's an underlining issue and the complaint isn't really 75 hard. It's about something else, but this is an easy thing to complain about. So let's get to the root of it. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? So what is happening is it's exposing areas where you're weak, that friction is. And what ends up happening is most people shy away from it. They stop doing the thing that's causing the friction. They can never get past these weaknesses that they have because they're never enduring that friction long enough to pop out the other side with the perspective, right? To where they can shift and they can change who they are for the better. But if there's not pain or discomfort in a conversation, all of these things are just opportunities to get better. The friction is a weakness. Anytime that we've had any friction, that exposes that there's some weaknesses and we have to figure that out. It's the same thing with an employee having a little bit of friction, saying it is true. It is real. This is where we falter. We're exposing that. Now that individual has a choice. You feel completely defeated and they bounce. Or do they say, I do need to do better? The whole point is, one, friction is not a bad thing, and face it head on between you and anybody in your organization that you need to do that with. Secondly, take some ownership and some accountability that you've allowed some sort of level of complacency, whether it's in your life, in your business, whether it's with employees, whatever that may be, and make sure that they understand and know that the friction isn't happening because you don't care. It's happening because you do care. And the outcome that you're trying to get only benefits everybody, so that if we can figure this thing out, then we're all going to win. That's a way to cause a little bit of discomfort, a little pain, a little friction, maybe feeling a little defeated, but waking up the next day and being like, I didn't like that feeling, so I'm going to show up in a different manner. And he showed up in a different manner immediately, the very next day. If that conversation didn't happen, today would have been the same as yesterday, is the same as last week. The level of complacency will only increase.
Until what point?
Until there's friction. If something's got to change,
That was
right?
one of my problems, and this is why, like, going back to what we were saying, is that I don't mind having difficult conversations, because I used to just be like, I shouldn't have to tell you what to do. But then every time, I'm going to start over right now. The last VA that I was just working with, despite my better reasoning and all my experiences, like, get rid of him day one. I'm like, I just not matching up. Got 8 weeks out. Here we are, still having the same problems. But it's not there wasn't a lack of like, okay, cool, here's what the expectation is. Tell me what you need. Here's the resources, going over and over and over. But I did set the expectation with him. And I kept telling him, I'm like, listen, dude, if you think that the value of what you're getting out of this is skimming hours, if you think that you're winning because you're pulling 2 or 3 extra hours that you're not really working in the day, but you think that you get to steal those few bucks, if that is as big as your vision is, I hired you because I thought you were smart, but you're actually not smart.
Yeah.
You know, if you can't see that the picture is bigger than this and that the benefit could be a lot bigger than this,
Yeah.
I don't want you working here anyway. But that friction, like, I finally had to get to a point where I realized didn't matter how many times I called the dude out, didn't matter how many times on this.
You got elevated.
Oh, dude, I was,
So
you were there. I was like,
So it got to the point where you could no longer tolerate the bullshit. And so it hit a friction point with you that hit a nerve.
finally,
And then boom.
But I had already
We're
warned him. I said, I'm giving you heads up, man.
Yeah.
Like, this is the last time we're going to have this conversation. And I'm like, so it's prove me different.
Yeah.
Right? Like, prove me different. But that part, dude, I've learned, I thought that it was firing somebody quickly. I got rid of the problem, but I continue to have the problem because I was the problem, right? I wasn't addressing it the right way. I wasn't talking to him. I wasn't trying to get to the root of it. Now, despite all of that with this guy, I went through all of those.
Yeah.
Like, I really,
You're not going to win them all. Yeah.
No, holy shit, dude. This one was like,
You're not going to win them all, but what does it do? What good does it do to place blame anywhere outside but yourself? Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So like what you're saying, like, okay, these were repetitive problems. If it's high turnover, I'm the common denominator, right?
Dude, let's start at the very beginning of it. I had an intuition about the dude and I didn't
listen.
I got sold. Like, of all of the people, all the candidates, that guy was most eloquent, salesman-like. And I was like,
oh my God,
he's so smart. And I was like,
I've been sold too. I've been sold once. The guy comes in, oh my gosh, your arms. Did you work out arms like every day? And I'm like, I freaking like
Thanks
this.
for noticing.
Yeah, I like this guy. First off, something about him. Yeah. I can't really put my finger on it. Anyways, we go into the interview and he goes, and this is a sales job, right? Do you guys have scripts here? I absolutely love scripts and following scripts, all this stuff or whatever. And I'm just like,
where this is going. Why, yes, we do.
I'm like, we have great script and we have rebuttals and oh my gosh, that's incredible. Like, I just figured that if it's already been figured out, you don't got to reinvent the wheel and just like read this script, like with enthusiasm, blah, blah. And I'm just like, holy cow, the heavens opened up and dropped this, the best probably salesman in the world, that I'm not going to have to say, stick to the script. He asked about it in the interview. Anyways, he came and went very quick. He didn't stick to the script. I'm like, it's so weird to me how sometimes people could say all the right things, but they act in a completely different manner. And what they are is really just good salespeople. We all get sold sometimes a bad hand or, think that we're going to be receiving something and we don't receive that. That's all part of it.
But dude, I knew all the way along every time. He would sit there, he's hired to do a certain job and he kept asking things that were outside of that. And I was like, all right, this only comes in alignment if you're actually doing side work.
Things. Yeah.
You're doing side work. I'll help you out, understand maybe long-term. We obviously want to give you the best opportunity. But deep down inside, I already knew, like literally day one, that was like, something's just not in alignment with it.
It was just one of many rather than the thing.
But it did. So my point is this, is that even though the friction didn't lead to the outcome of having it work with this guy, what the friction actually reminded me of is trust my initial intuition and my processes of hiring 100+ VAs over a 20-year period. Stick to that. There's a certain type of a character or quality in the person that I learned to recognize. I know what they are.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily submissive, but they're more almost like people pleasers. They're just like, you know,
they don't want to let you down, and they want to perform.
And this guy was like, I'm the shit.
Yeah.
And I liked it because I was like, you're pretty confident, dude.
I like your cockiness.
Yeah, but
there wasn't enough behind.
That was the telltale sign. So that was friction.
That was ego, not confidence.
No, and I would.
Yeah. So,
but that is what you want. You want to hire somebody that's smart enough that they could do their own thing.
Yeah.
Right. And go off and, you know,
sure.
So I can't really fault the dude.
Yeah. I mean, it just really all comes down to one, that friction that you experienced that was somebody leaving only reinforced something that you kind of already knew so that you can move forward and be better. Right? To where you don't falter away from, hey, this is just the way that I do it, and I'm going to listen to the way that I feel about it. So either way, you've still gained something from the friction, right? There was still progress that was made from it. Or let's say, for instance, you know, there was a friction point, you had the conversation, they turned around for the better. Cool. You know, so either way, if somebody doesn't work out because of the friction, that's okay. You hopefully learn from it and get better. But if you have a little bit of friction and a clear path out, like, hey, this is what we're going to be doing now, and they show up and they start performing in a manner immediately. If they show up this next day the same way the day before, after like one of those real conversations, then you know that it's a problem. If they show up the next day with like a renewed sense of like, I'm going to prove myself. And we all have to prove ourselves. I've got to prove myself to myself every single day by showing up in the manner in which I do. Like, you know, like I have to prove myself to my wife that I'm the best selection, you know, for her every single year, right? Like divorce rates are through the roof. We should always, no matter what we're doing, believe that to a certain extent, we're the best selection for what it is that we're doing for other people, the service that we're providing. And if we don't believe that, then why is that? Where's the friction or the weakness in that? And make the adjustments necessary. And so anytime somebody's asked, like at a mastermind or whatever, like, how do I know when I should let somebody go? And I'm like, you already have somebody in mind. And the fact that you're bringing that person to this situation right now, you already know what the answer is. How do I know when it's the right time to hire somebody?
When you're asking that,
you're asking that question for a reason, aren't you? Yeah. You don't really want to, because it takes money, time, effort. It's this new thing that you've got to do, and you are already busy enough with all the other stuff. But you're asking the question because you already know the answer. And what you're doing is looking for confirmation. When you need to stop looking for confirmation and stop asking that question to other people when you already know what the answer is. Hopefully the idea would be in a mastermind is to get people to lead them just to trust their intuition. Right? Which you've done many, many times, and it's always worked out. And then the one time that you went against it, it didn't work out. Right?
I think everybody can say that though.
Yeah.
For the
everybody,
most part, we all always have that little intuition.
Yeah.
That we know that we, you know.
Why would you ask the question otherwise? Because there has been a thought that's been planted in your mind about that. So you ask about the thought when in reality, the thought was given to you for a reason. If that person keeps coming up in your mind over and over, when you're listening to a podcast like this and you already have a name and a face of an employee that's like, fuck, this person's not working out. All of these things are happening right now in somebody's brain. And we just kind of, you know, all we're doing is fanning the ember that already exists. And hopefully it turns into a fire. In other words, they take action, right? There's a burn that is deep enough within them that they say, okay, no longer, this is acceptable. Let's move on this. The hard part is being an entrepreneur and not having somebody else right above you doing that for you.
Right.
Saying, hey, you're getting complacent. You're getting that, like, I don't have somebody saying, hey, you.
You need to show up at this time, do this.
Yeah. Like what impresses me the most is when people have a regimen that's greater than the average person when they don't even have to have a regimen anymore. Like for instance, I look at Mark Wahlberg, he gets up at 4 a.m. This dude is outworking somebody that's complaining right now about their finances that just does 9 to 5.
And dude, the reality is he could take his foot off.
So why? You wouldn't keep showing back up and doing what he's doing if it was absolutely terrible the whole time, but yet you have a way out. There's a back door called hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's no longer about the money. It's now about the way that it makes him feel operating at his peak. It's undeniable that if you're getting up at 3:30 and you're in the gym by 4 a.m. every day, that's undeniable proof to your brain that you're operating at your highest level or your
Cool, I've never thought of that. Yeah.
So now what? He gets to live with a feeling, an emotion about himself. He gets to feel good. Why? Because he's earned that. He also has a bunch of money where he can buy the dopamine, but he's really the real stuff is so much better. It's the pure, it's the good. You're getting the same substance of a dopamine or whatever once through money and things, which fade away. That's the fast food version where there's really the earned.
It's a cool concept. I've never really thought of it like
Right.
people that are at that level.
So if you can now start manipulating your mind in a manner in which says this thing that everybody else says is bad or that doesn't want to do it or they complain about doing it, you actually get a high off of doing it, you're going to do it very frequently in a manner in which makes people think like, what the fuck? This person's different. The only thing that's different about them is they did the very difficult things for such a long period of time that they experienced a result from those difficult struggles that they had to endure. So as they leveled up, they're like, holy cow, what felt bad was actually good. Because now I'm living over here based upon the effort that I put in here. So now what do? They want to stay down here. In other words, they want to keep compounding what they receive. And it's not just about receiving monetarily, because it gets to the point where they have contract after contract. They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Why are they still performing that way? Because they are experiencing progress through the emotion of pain and suffering, being exhausted, fatigued, tired, friction. Those are the things that are the sign for them that they're actually in a moment of true progress. They are changing in a way that most people can't endure. That's why everybody else stays the same for 80 fucking years on this earth and in their existence, because they associate that pain, suffering, that friction as bad. And the greats do it like they love it, because guess what? There's a part of them that actually truly does. They learn to love it. We have to earn how we feel about ourselves. The only way you're going to feel greater about yourself is giving yourself undeniable proof that you operated in a manner during friction and fatigue in which you didn't want to operate at, and you just eventually gave yourself undeniable proof that you're willing to bear and endure what most people aren't, because you care so much about yourself and operating at a different level. That's so meaningful to you that you will bear more than what most people will. But first you have to prove that to then earn the feeling that you feel about yourself. So everybody goes down this path of starting to make a change. Friction and fatigue ends up happening. And when I was going through that friction and that fatigue, like literally just, I could put my head down and take a nap at any moment. It was tough. I know that this just has to be part of the progress. And my body will have to eventually adapt if I keep doing what I'm doing with it. What ends up happening, it's not just the body, your brain ends up adapting as well, because I don't think it can live in a state of misery forever. It has to eventually compound and say, okay, wait a minute, this isn't all bad. So now all we're doing is saying, more suffering, more friction, please, because I have undeniable proof that is where I've grown. So if I stay in the friction and stay in the suffering, then I will have no choice but to grow, because I will have to change my perspective around how I view suffering or how I view friction. Because if I don't, I can't endure. So I will have no choice but to change my entire perspective on those things, which changes your entire perspective on everything. You can't just change your perspective on one thing or two things. It's going to shift your whole perspective. In other words, when your perspective is shift on a topic and you found out you were wrong, you almost wonder where else that you believe things to be true that might not be true. And you start becoming more open-minded to different ways of doing things. I was very rigid in my ways for a long period of time. And I'm still rigid in my ways in some aspects. But over the last year or two, I've tried to be a lot better.
But I think it always depends on the way that your brain can predict things. And you're like, no, I've gone down that path before and there's a brick wall and I'm not going down the path again. But sometimes you're just like, oh, it wasn't really.
Well, sometimes you create the brick wall because you just don't want to do it. When you said, hey, you should do a newsletter, I'm like, no, I don't read newsletters. Those are fucking dumb.
Yeah,
based upon my own perspective.
Right.
Okay? So I was biased in my perspective, but it got to the point where I felt a little friction. I was trying to defend my perspective. There was an opportunity for growth there. So what did I do? I decided to do the newsletter because I felt friction there. You see what I'm saying? So now my perspective about other things, that when I immediately throw a wall up, I'm like, oh, you're throwing a wall up. Maybe you should explore the other side of that a little bit more. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please rate, review the show, share the show with somebody that you love and care about that you know will benefit from it. Other than that, keep kicking ass, and don't forget to tune into the Easier Money podcast.